Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how you know what someone else is feeling just from their face? And what if what you expect someone to be feeling actually changes what you see on their face? Well, this new study dives deep into that exact question. We all think we can read faces like an open book, right? But these researchers found that our own expectations might be playing a bigger role than we think, subtly changing how we even see other people's emotions. Let's start with the big idea. For a long time, scientists thought we just looked at a face and directly saw the emotion, like reading a label. Happiness has a smile, sadness has a frown. Simple as that. But then, some scientists started thinking about something called predictive processing. Imagine your brain is constantly trying to guess what is going to happen next, based on what it already knows. So, if you know someone is happy, your brain might start expecting to see a happy face. And this expectation could actually influence what you perceive. The researchers here wanted to see if this brain-guessing game affects not just how we judge an emotion, but how we perceive the facial expression itself. They designed a clever experiment. Imagine you hear someone say, "I feel so happy," right before you see their face start to change. Then maybe it morphs a little towards a happy expression, or maybe it morphs a little towards a sad one. After the face disappears, you are asked about it. The key question here is, does hearing "I feel so happy" make you see the face as more happy? Even if the actual visual changes are small, and does it change how you see the face, not just what emotion you think it is? So, in the first part of the study, they had people listen to someone say they were feeling happy or sad. Then they saw a face morph from an ambiguous expression towards either a happy or a sad one. After the morph stopped somewhere in the middle, participants had to rate how happy or sad the face looked. What they found was pretty cool. People's ratings in experiment 1A were definitely influenced by what they heard. If the person said they were happy, participants rated the face as happier. If they said they were sad, the face was rated as sadder. This confirms that what we expect can influence our emotional judgment. But they wanted to be sure it wasn't just a response bias thing. Maybe people just said happy because they heard the word happy, not because the face actually looked happier. So in experiment 1B, they asked a slightly different question. How intensely emotional is this face? This way. They weren't directly mapping the audio cue to the rating. And guess what? They still found that faces looked more intense when the audio cue matched the face's direction of change. Congruent pairings, where what you heard matched what the face was doing, were rated as more intense than when they didn't match. This suggests it wasn't just a simple word game. The expectation was genuinely influencing how the expression was perceived. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Experiments 1A and 1B showed that expectations influence our judgments about the emotion and its intensity. But do they actually change what we perceive visually? That's what experiments 2A and 2B aim to test here. Instead of rating the face, participants had to compare the final face they saw to a probe face that was slightly more or less expressive. Their job was to say if the probe face was the same or different. It is a known thing in vision science that when we watch things move, especially over time, we tend to think they've moved further than they actually have. It is like our brain is trying to predict the next step and kind of fills in the gap. This is called representational momentum. And it happens with faces too. They sometimes look more expressive than they objectively are. The crucial finding came in experiment 2B, where there was a longer delay between seeing the face and being shown the probe. In this setup, they found that if the auditory cue, what the person said, matched the facial expression's direction, people were more likely to overestimate how expressive the face was. They thought the face had moved further along its expression path than it actually had. Specifically, when their prior expectation aligned with what they saw, this means that the prior information didn't just influence their judgment of emotion, but it actually changed their perceptual representation of the visual information. So, what does this all mean? The researchers found that our expectations and prior knowledge don't just color our interpretations of facial expressions, they can actually subtly alter our visual perception. It is like our brains are actively constructing our reality, not just passively receiving it. What is really important is that this effect was more pronounced when there was a bit of a delay. This suggests that it is not an immediate, raw visual process. Instead, it seems like our brain has a chance to integrate the prior information, the audio cue, with the visual input over time. Initially, we might have a more general tendency to see motion and expression as further along its path. But then, our prior expectations refine this perception. If what we expect matches what we're seeing, we overemphasize it. A major strength of this study is how they address potential biases. By using intensity ratings in experiment 1B and a perceptual comparison task in experiments 2A and 2B, they move beyond simple labeling tasks. This makes their findings more robust, showing that it is not just about us being easily led by words, but about our predictive brain actively shaping our visual experience. The fact that congruent pairings led to greater overestimation in experiment 2b, with a longer delay, is a key finding. It strongly supports the predictive processing idea that our brains are constantly making predictions and updating them based on incoming sensory data. When information aligns, our predictions are reinforced, and this can subtly warp our perception to make it fit. This research challenges older ideas about emotion perception being a simple, direct readout from the face. Instead, it fits very well with newer theories that see perception as an active, constructive process. Your brain isn't just a camera. It is more like a scientist constantly forming hypotheses, testing them against sensory input and adjusting its understanding. This means that when you see a face, what you are truly experiencing is a blend of the raw visual cues and your own internal predictions, shaped by everything you know and expect. One interesting point is the timing. The general tendency to overestimate expressions happened fairly quickly, but the influence of prior information making that overestimation stronger for matching cues took a bit longer. This suggests that our brains first have an automatic tendency to overdo-perceive motion and expressions, and then, with more time, they incorporate higher level expectations like what someone told you they were feeling. It's like a two-step process, an initial predictive leap, followed by a guided correction based on context. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers use very simple audio cues like, "I feel so happy," which are more direct than the complex social situations we encounter daily. In real life, we have to infer both the emotion and the expected facial reaction, which is a lot more complicated. Also, they used morphed faces, which are great for control but might not be as nuanced as real, spontaneous expressions. Natural expressions have all sorts of subtle timing and variations that could make them even more ambiguous and potentially influenced even more by our expectations. But overall, this is a groundbreaking study. For the first time, it provides strong evidence that prior information about someone's emotional state can actually change how we perceptually represent their facial expressions, not just how we judge them. It confirms that our brains are actively predicting and constructing our social reality. This has huge implications for understanding social interactions, why we sometimes misunderstand others, and even how conditions like anxiety or depression might affect our perception. It reminds us that what we see is not just what is there, but what our brain, shaped by context and expectation, tells us we are seeing. And that is it for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this as fascinating as I did, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts, and please subscribe so you don't miss our next dive into the human mind. Until next time, stay curious.